Hello, my name's Jeff Nichols, and I'm the writer and director of the BIKERIDERS. My brother gave it to me, my older brother. He gave it to me in 2003, and I just was immediately struck by it. Just as a casual glance, you look at it and the photographs are really beautiful. They're really engaging. They look like real people, because they were. But when you take a little bit harder look at the book and you compare these photographs with these interviews, you realize pretty quickly what Danny Lyon was really doing. He was capturing the full breadth of a subculture. As a filmmaker that's interested, Danny's book was an instruction booklet. It was like the ingredients to a recipe, and it gave me everything that I needed to describe this subculture in detail. It feels a bit like a prequel. You know, today we have a pretty clear idea in our minds what biker culture, biker gang culture is. This is a story about what really established that, where that culture really came from, how it formed in the first place. Because it didn't birth itself as a hyper-violent, drug-fueled gang. There wasn't that much organization to it. It was far more free-formed. I compare it to punk rock in the 90s. They just felt like they didn't belong, and so they kind of moved over here. I guess if you're asking if this film's different, it's because it just shows kind of how we got to where we are today. This probably won't be a surprise to many people, but the only actor I had in mind when I was writing was Michael Shannon. And that was because in 2012, before I had met Danny Lyon, I was kind of stalking him on his website, and one day these QuickTime audio files popped up, and they were some of the real recordings. And now I could actually listen to it. And there was Kathy, and she sounded incredible, and then Zipco came on, and he sounded exactly like Michael Shannon. And I was like, this is it, you know? So when I started to write it, no, I really didn't have anyone specific in mind. You could dream about Tom Hardy, but he's a hard one for a director to get their hands on, so we were really fortunate to pair with him. I didn't even know Austin Butler existed when I sat down to write this script. It wasn't until I met him in LA a few months before Elvis came out. I was struck by this young, beautiful, compelling man. I felt I could hold the weight of what this character needs to do in the film. Jodie Comer, you know, she came to me through my casting director. Sadly, I hadn't been watching Killing Eve, so I wasn't familiar yet with just how talented she was. In fact, my first meeting with Tom was bringing me through London, so I was able to see the play because I had already cast Jodie at that point. And I walked out of this performance and was like, wow, this has to be one of the greatest actors in the world. And that turned out to be true. There's a 3-minute sequence in the beginning of The Outsiders by Coppola. I think that's the most perfect 3 minutes of a movie maybe ever. And when I watched it, I was like, I want to make a whole movie that feels like those 3 minutes. So I made The BIKERIDERS. The motorcycles. Some of these bikes were over 60 years old, and they didn't like it when it was too hot or too cold, too dry or too wet. They were just incredibly difficult to deal with, and they all weighed over 1,000 pounds. So we were always talking about the bikes. We had a special trailer to keep them warm at night. It was just kind of a constant concern. Not to mention, at some point then we had to put these very famous, very beautiful people on them without helmets, and that was terrifying.
I built this for nothing. This is our family.